Bienvenidos a un programa más de la serie. Hoy en Adelante, Voces de la Frontera participa en Untitled, Wisconsin, una manifestación estatal de Wisconsin que se solidariza con los trabajadores. También funcionarios de la Casa Blanca visitan Milwaukee para reunirse con líderes latinos y discutir asuntos críticos que los afectan. Y la escritora de libros infantiles Julia Durango visita Kenosha. Este 10 de marzo, miles se reunieron en el Capitolio para mostrar su solidaridad con los trabajadores afectados por las leyes estatales. Miembros de Voces de la Frontera estuvieron presentes.
We have confirmation, and we have over 62,000 people there.
Officially, there were over 65,000 people who arrived in Madison on a sparkling Saturday morning. They came by the busload, carrying homemade signs and a common purpose. Just like last year's marches, this reunion celebration would remain mostly peaceful, except for the noise. Passions may run high, but the message is clear.
We're here today to tell Governor Walker we want our rights back, to take your hands off our schools, restore the funding to our technical colleges, to our K-12 schools, to our UW schools, to stop raising taxes on our poorest citizens, and stop your divide and conquer tactics. They will not stand in Wisconsin.
The signs are meant to be seen by others in the crowd, but especially by our camera and other media. Some are deliberately rude and insulting to the governor, but he isn't the only subject. There's a collective sense of humor among those who display their concern for each other in creative ways. After a year of living with the cuts to education alone, you may just have to laugh to keep from crying.
Scottiopoly, get your Scottiopoly here. Conceived and born in Wisconsin, Scottiopoly, the alternative to Monopoly.
It's a historical game all about the first 100 days of office when all of this came down. It's a game of power and influence and how it really affects my free clinic because so many people are going to get knocked off from Badger Care, Medicaid, and we're just, a lot of our contributors are union people and they've lost so much out of their paychecks that now I don't know how else to support my free clinic. So I came up with this idea about this game, and I used to be a teacher. I don't want our children to forget what happened in those first 100 days.
It was the loss of collective bargaining that sparked the protests last year, and union participation is still the most visible element in these gatherings. As the rest of the legislative agenda became clear, though, more and more people found common ground in resisting what are perceived as attacks on voting rights. Leading the way by questioning the manner in which redistricting was implemented, Voces de la Frontera convinced a panel of judges to order a redrawing of the maps used to decide legislative districts on Milwaukee's south side.
Voces de la Frontera has always been present from the beginning. We've been here marching. It's why we felt it was so important to come back on the anniversary of the day that Governor Walker took away collective bargaining rights for public employees. And we feel that way because we're an organization that represents working class families, and that this is an important right. It's an attack against the rights of all workers to organize collectively. And so it's an attack against Latinos and immigrant workers who are disproportionately part of the working class.
What would you like to say to Governor Walker today?
You know, this agenda is attacking the rights of Latinos, and Latinos are the largest growing ethnic population in the last 10 years. We're a vital part of this economy. He's been attacking immigrants, which are dear to the Latino community as the most important civil rights issue for the Latino community is immigration reform, and that we have to kick them out, there's lives on the line.
Organized labor and workers in every community are waking up to the fact that their interests are forever linked in the face of laws that have been passed in many states. Voces has newfound partners in the professions, among students and workers, both within and outside the Latino community. Many more are now willing to speak out in their own defense and in the defense of others.
creemos que los trabajadores y los migrantes formamos el mismo grupo. Ambos somos trabajadores y cualquier ataque a un trabajador o a un migrante es el mismo ataque. Entonces nos hemos despertado tanto las uniones como nosotros los migrantes de que estamos en el mismo barco, que el ataque es a la misma persona. Entonces nos hemos dado cuenta que juntos hacemos más fuerte nuestro movimiento, juntos podemos lograr muchas cosas y eso nos motiva a estar juntos ellos y nosotros.
Claro que sí, hay muchos inmigrantes que están siendo afectados en más de una forma, pero una de las formas más grandes es que las pólizas de Scott Walker no nos están dejando avanzar como comunidad, como trabajadores, y tenemos que poner un alto, ¿no? Porque ahorita por los trabajadores y mañana por nosotros, o en colaboración siempre.
Espero que la representación de voces siempre ha sido fuerte y recibimos muchas felicitaciones, muchos buenos comentarios de todas las uniones, porque Voces ha estado presente, pero yo le mando un mensaje a la gente en general, la comunidad hispana, la comunidad latina en Milwaukee y en Estados Unidos, de que despierten, que se involucren en sus organizaciones locales, que se unen a Voces, y esto se va a hacer más fuerte porque el beneficio es para todos, no nomás es para Voces, no nomás es para las uniones, es para todos los inmigrantes legales e indocumentados. Es el beneficio, si se logra alguna vez esto, se logra algo bueno, será para todos.
Many Wisconsinites see an end to this chapter of conflict with the recall process. It remains to be seen if the effort to remove Governor Walker and change the makeup of the Senate will succeed. Even with the huge turnout at this event, polling suggests a close decision. The question remains, who will replace Governor Walker if he loses the recall election in June? The crowds at the rally were a ready-made campaign event for those who aspire to replace the governor. State Senator Kathleen Vineout is one of the declared candidates for the office of governor.
I am planning on running for governor. I believe Wisconsin needs a fresh start. We need to go and start over again. We need a new way of doing democracy in Wisconsin. We need to heal the divisions among us. We need to respect each other while we debate our differences, and we need to stop pitting business against labor and the public sector against the private sector.
Kathleen Falk was the first to declare herself a candidate.
Well, Governor Walker gave big tax breaks to a few corporations, and then he cut public education by over $1 billion. That doesn't help our children. It doesn't help us get jobs. It doesn't help us grow our economy.
John Nichols has reported on Wisconsin's political climate for the Capital Times and Nation magazine. He was the keynote speaker and had this to say about Wisconsin's future.
Over time, Wisconsin opens its doors and welcomes every language, every voice, every people. And we will be a better, greater state when we embrace our Latino community and say, you are fully a part of who we are. And I think that day is coming.
El senador Scott Fitzgerald fue invitado por Adelante a responder a este segmento, pero no estuvo disponible. Funcionarios de la administración del presidente Obama visitaron Milwaukee para reunirse con líderes latinos, empresarios y miembros de la comunidad con el fin de discutir temas críticos que afectan a la comunidad hispana y a la nación.
And one of the things that we hear across the country when we talk about some of the issues that are important to Latinos is that people just do not know what the federal government is doing to be able to provide relief. That's why the federal officials are here with you to be able to make some commitments to you to be able to work together, and that's the purpose of today.
El pasado marzo, funcionarios de la Casa Blanca visitaron Milwaukee como parte de la iniciativa Excelencia Educativa de los Hispanos. El objetivo del evento fue el reunir líderes y miembros de la comunidad latina de Wisconsin para conversar con los funcionarios sobre los problemas que afectan localmente y en la nación a los latinos.
Este congreso, este foro, es un congreso que responde a una serie de discusiones que hubieron el año pasado en la Casa Blanca y en la comunidad latina a nivel nacional. Esto es importantísimo. Esta es la primera vez que esto se está haciendo. donde gente de la Casa Blanca y oficiales de diferentes departamentos federales vienen a diferentes comunidades a decir qué es lo que ellos pueden hacer, a decir lo que se está haciendo y lo que la comunidad cree que ellos deben hacer.
The purpose of the summit here today is to be able to hear from the community, find out what any policy recommendations they have, inform them around our policy recommendations, and at the end of the day, see what the President's administration has been doing to really address some of the issues that are important to the Hispanic community here in Wisconsin. The President has been very clear from the beginning that any of the changes that we want to be able to do in improving our economy and increasing access to health care and making ourselves the most educated country in the world, we cannot accomplish any of that without a Hispanic community in our country. We recently shown that we accounted for more than 50% of the increase in population in our country. And so we want to be able to make a dent in those areas. The Hispanic community has to fully participate. What we're here to do is to be able to engage the Hispanic community here in Wisconsin to be able to do just that.
I think that Wisconsin is one of those places that's very active.
Uno de los temas de discusión fue el de amenazas de implementar leyes tipo Arizona en Wisconsin y sobre cómo estas leyes podrían afectar la educación de los estudiantes indocumentados.
Let me first say that the President is supportive of comprehensive immigration reform. The idea that different states are dealing with this issue separately has already been challenged by the federal government, not only in Arizona, but also in Alabama. We also are very much focused on ensuring that civil rights are not being violated in our schools. Last year, the Department of Education issued a policy guidance reminding parents, students, and school districts that every child, including those who are undocumented in elementary and secondary schools, have the right to go to public school, primary and secondary level, not only under Supreme Court authority, Pilar v. Doe, but under our Title VI and other civil rights laws.
Otro de los temas de conversación fueron las deportaciones y sobre qué ha cambiado desde la implementación del programa de discreción prosecutorial que prometía dar alivio a casos de inmigrantes indocumentados sin récords criminales en proceso de deportación.
Well, the administration has, and the department, refocused its priorities really to people in the community who are a threat to public safety and have criminal records, and those will be the priorities for enforcement and renewal. There has been training that has gone on with our Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, along with ICE, to train those officers in the use of prosecutorial discretion.
Un abogado en inmigración nos dio sus comentarios sobre este programa de discreción prosecutorial y si en realidad ha ayudado a personas en proceso de deportación.
Mr. Christopher, is this policy on prosecutorial discretion of President Obama really working?
Sure. Basically what came down was this idea that the Obama administration was going to focus on criminals in the immigration proceedings, and this would hopefully alleviate some of the backlog. In the memo, they put forth 10 to 12 different factors that the prosecutors are supposed to be looking at. In my experience, I have tried to use the prosecutorial discretion and highlighted the memo. Very, very few times have I been successful in doing that. In fact, only one time have I had a positive response out of dozens and dozens of cases, which I think clearly fit most of the criteria in the memo. So there's clearly a disconnect, I think, between Washington and what is happening at the court level.
Introduce the federal officials here that are going to spend the day with you. Ultimately, we know that one of the areas that we still need to do more work on is around immigration, and this is something that the President has been committed, but we cannot disregard the accomplishments around healthcare, around education. We are now the largest minority in the higher education field. That has never happened before in our history. We are now raising standards for Latino students and starting to close down the dropout factories in our community. That has never happened. We're about to ensure more than 9 million Latinos with the Affordable Health Care Act, something that people have been working for decades. So these are great accomplishments that we've been able to do in the Latino community, but there's still more work to do, and the President is working day in, day out to make that happen.
Well, I think the message is the following. I think everybody has a stake in the future of our community. Everyone should believe that we are, in fact, responsible for the advancement of our community, because that leads to healthy communities, it leads to healthy states, and it leads to a healthy nation. We're all in it together, and we need to ensure that we understand that and appreciate that to make America better in the future.
The Center for Children's Literature, dirigido por el profesor Jan Stuig, presentó la visita de la autora de libros infantiles Julia Durango. La escritora es reconocida por sus obras Dream Away y Under the Mambo Moon. Siguió una agenda ocupada que incluyó una visita a la escuela Edward Bain y una noche de diversión familiar en la biblioteca Hedberg de Carthage University.
My name is Julia Durango. I'm a children's book author from Ottawa, Illinois. I grew up all over the country. Due to my father's business, every time he got a promotion, we moved to a new state. So I was born in Las Vegas, but we didn't stay there very long. We lived in California and Rhode Island and Indianapolis, Missouri. I finally ended up at the University of Illinois in college, and I was a Latin American Studies major there, and that's when I started traveling to Latin America. And then I spent many years traveling back and forth from Illinois and Colombia, Costa Rica, Mexico. When I was 18 years old, I took a trip to Brazil with my sister. I'd met some Brazilian students at the University of Illinois my first year there, and I had been thinking about taking a summer trip to Europe, doing the whole backpack in Europe thing with friends, you know, on the fly, taking the trains and seeing all the countries of Europe. And my Brazilian friend said, "You don't want to go to Europe, you want to go to Brazil, you want to go to Rio, you want to go to Sao Paulo. We have beautiful beaches, beautiful cities and mountains. And come and stay and you can meet our families." And so I thought, well, I'll do something different. So my sister and I, very young, very naive to spend the summer in Brazil, and we had the time of our lives and we loved it. And really, I kind of fell in love with Latin American culture and music at that time. And so that really started it all. My major was Latin American Studies, so I continued to study at the University of Illinois. And the Latin American Studies department at that time, and still is, a very, very prestigious department. Great professors in the Latin American Studies program. They're bringing a lot of scholars from Latin America, so it was just really an amazing education. Later in my life, I was studying at the university. I had spent a lot of time in Colombia. I went to Bogota when I was 19 and studied at the Universidad de los Andes there. And while I was there, I started working as a volunteer in a program for street children. And I kept going back, and I eventually wrote my senior thesis about my work with the children there, about the street children, the problems of street children. And I continued on with my education. I got my master's degree. I even started a PhD, always thinking that my career would be to go back to Bogota and work with street children. But then I got married to a Colombian, but who lived in the United States, and had my first child. My son was born. And all of a sudden, my career plan to live in Bogota was not possible anymore, because I had a baby to take care of and a family to think about at that point. And that's when I realized I was reading children's books, and my son is half Colombian, and so I wanted to buy books, find children's books that would reflect his heritage, his Colombian side. There were plenty of really great books around. Well, I know a lot about Colombia. I've spent a lot of time there, so maybe I'll write a book for my son about Colombia and about his Colombian heritage. And that's sort of where it started. I just had this idea that I was going to write something down for my own child. And so I started learning about children's books. I started reading a lot of them. I started rereading all of my favorite books from my childhood, my own favorite books. And I kind of fell in love with children's books all over again. And so I started writing stories for my son.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here on a Friday night. I'd like to thank Dr. Stewart and Liz and her crew for organizing this event.
I've written several picture books for younger children. I've written a book called Cha-Cha Chimps, which is kind of my best-known book for little kids, in which it's a counting story, and it's got dancing monkeys, and there are monkeys doing the cha-cha-cha and monkeys doing the tango, and it's just kind of a fun way to teach kids to count and dance. It's got a lot of rhythm. So I would say in that sense, my goal for kids is just to have fun with a book, to see a book and think, oh, that's going to be a good time. So I wrote a lot of those books when my kids were younger. With the books that I've written for older children, I have put a lot of my love for Latin America in those books. And so I guess I just want to share that with kids, with not only my own children, but with any kids. I want them to know more about Latin American culture. And my latest book is about Latin American music. So I'm really just trying to share the things I love with young people.
He describes the people a little bit, and then each person who comes into the store, they get their own poem to talk about the music that they love.
Under the Mambo Moon, it is, there are poems about different types of Latin music. So there are poems about tango, there is a poem about merengue, son jarocho, cumbia. I'm very fond of this last one that I wrote, Under the Mambo Moon, just because it took me 10 years to write it. I started writing it when my children were babies. I just poem by poem. It's my only poetry book. And it reminds me of how much happiness Latin American music has given me.
Okay, man, you pretend like you have caps on and you're taking them off.
Music, I think, is a way that brings, it's so powerful. It brings people together. It can change your mood. It can do so much to lift people up. And so this book for me is, of all of the books I've written, the one that is probably the most important and that I most want to share with children. I think the message here is that I want kids to know that there's so many really amazing Latin American musical traditions. They're very diverse. There's everything from mariachi to like I said, tango. But they have some common components, and that is this fusion of people that live in America. There's Latin American music combines African drumming traditions that the slaves brought over with them. It has indigenous instruments that the Native Americans use, the maracas and guiros, the scrapers. Those are all Native American music traditions. And then the Spaniards and the Portuguese brought over their stringed instruments, their little guitars, their violins, piano, accordions. And Latin American music had sort of combined all of these different sounds and rhythms and instruments and made something new and vibrant. I mean, I think it's just a really amazing creation that happened of this fusion of different people. For little kids, I love to read my Cha-Cha Chimps book. This is the one that I said is a counting book, and it has to do with music again. It shows my love for music, and it's just a fun book to read aloud with kids and get them sort of bouncing around. So this is, I guess, my favorite for the little kids. Another book that I really love to share with kids is a book that I co-wrote with Linda Sue Park. And this book is called Yum Yuck, a fold-out book of people sounds. And this is sort of an introduction to different languages.
Boy speaks Arabic and he says, cat, cat, cat. And the Chinese boy says, ha, ha, ha. And the Korean girl says, ee, ee, ee. And the Polish girl says, hi, hi, hi. Hi, hi, hi. What do you think? What sound is that? Laughing. They're all laughing.
This is a fun one, I think, for maybe first, second, and third grade. My message here on this trip especially is to just be open to different traditions than your own. There's so much to be learned from other people and from other countries and different cultural traditions. And I've learned so much in my own life traveling and going someplace new and being open to new ideas and new music, new food. And so I guess that my message here is I hope that everybody would be open to new experiences and to people and to always be on the lookout to learn something new from somebody else.
Cha-Cha Chimps, that's kind of the big one about dancing monkeys.
I've heard that the parents in this area are very, very supportive of their children and maintaining their traditions at home. Applaud the parents who who do try to do that and who stay close with their children so that their children can understand. Even if you've got a mix of heritage, it's very interesting and it's good to know about, and it's good to grow up knowing who you are and where you came from.
Y al final de un programa más de Adelante, por favor déjenos saber sus comentarios en nuestro teléfono 297-7544 o escríbanos a nuestra dirección de correo electrónico en adelante@matc.edu y visítenos en nuestro sitio del internet en mptv.org y en Facebook. Sintonícenos en Milwaukee Public Television, canales 10.1 y 36.2 todos los martes a las 6:30 de la tarde y en canal 36.1 los miércoles a las 12:30 de la medianoche y los domingos a las 5:30 de la tarde. En Wisconsin Public Television, WPT 38.2 los martes a las 6 de la tarde y los jueves a la 1 de la mañana. Y en MPTV VM 10.3 los viernes a las 6:30 de la tarde y los domingos a las 6:30 de la mañana. Soy Patricia Gomez, gracias por acompañarnos.